My name is Margaret David, as Peru said, and I'm somewhat newly appointed as the Learning Disabilities Consultant for the Department of Education and Early Childhood. I started in this role sort of mid-February, almost just before the brunt of the COVID pandemic. So I met some people in person, some other staff at the Department of Education while I started there, but most of the people I've met have been virtually, so it's very nice to meet all of you. I hope to work collaboratively moving forward in whatever format our schools are going to operate in September and beyond. And so, as the title of my presentation states, I'd like to talk today about universal classroom instruction, strengthening literacy skills for all children, which I view as equitable practice and as building protective factors that foster resiliency across the lifespan. So, in the description of my presentation, I've asked, can we prevent the manifestation of learning difficulties and eventual diagnosis of learning disabilities? And I'd like to go through ways that the front-loaded portion of my presentation will focus on prevention within the context of multi-tiered levels of support, in particular in using what I think we like to call high leverage, but evidence-based strategies in the main classroom. And then ways that we can provide more intensive instruction for students that require a little bit more, how we can determine who these students are, and support students to get off to a really good start in building their reading skills as early in this developmental trajectory as possible. So before coming to the Department of Education, I've worked as a teacher and a school psychologist, though I don't do any of those jobs anymore. I don't practice at all. And I have been spending the last several years working in research and education as I work towards trying to finish my PhD, which sometimes I think will never happen, but maybe someday, hopefully very soon it will. And in doing so, in reading all the literature and working in research with students, what I've taken on is an environmental opportunity perspective. So how can we use the environment in classrooms and in schools to mitigate risk factors that might come with children to our classroom doors? And how can we then alter developmental trajectories in a more positive growth trajectory? So I guess for a minute, I want to talk about literacy and equity and the power that strong literacy skills have as a protective factor. And then conversely, what potential outcomes are both at the moment for children when they're in schools, but also for youth, young adults, and right into adulthood. And following my talk, we'll have Ken Fells, who will come and he'll provide some more contextual information around that. But of course, we know that literacy skills are extremely predictive of academic achievement. Academic achievement at the time that children enter school, but also across the school experience. So there's a really large correlation between strong literacy skills early in the P to 2 years and academic achievement much later in the high school setting and in the post-secondary setting. We know that strong literacy skills are tied to graduating grade 12, which is extremely important in 2020, opportunities to attend whatever setting of post-secondary that a student may choose to. And so I say choose because we want to be able to foster resiliency and strong academic skills so that children can choose the courses that are of interest to them in high school, and potentially if they would like to pursue post-secondary studies by choice, not by necessity, because they have not had opportunities to build content knowledge, to build motivation to engage with print, to be able to access curriculum that they're presented with across their school experience. We know that once they leave P to 12 and post-secondary, literacy is tied to job security and financial security right across the lifespan. By contrast, very early on in children's lives, when they begin to struggle, in particular with reading. We're talking about literacy today, but this could be, in the area of math as well. We start to see the psychosocial consequences emerge. So for many students, I'm sure we've all seen this, they begin to question their effectiveness or self-efficacy and their self-concept when it comes to activities that they're engaging with every single day in our school building. As time goes by, and this isn't large amounts of time, this is from one grade to the next, when students don't have well-developed literacy skills to connect with informational text, even in a very young age, grade 2 and 3, or with literature that is being used in the classroom content, they're not able to develop the content knowledge or vocabulary to support them as they go from grade to grade. And that gap will continue to grow until they're able to access the print in front of them. Low and underdeveloped literacy is tied to limited academic achievement, so many students begin to disengage from the school environment because they don't feel a sense of belonging, because they're feeling like they're not effective and they're not performing. And so for many, not all, but for some students, they're unable to finish their grade 12, which limits all kinds of opportunities for them as they enter young adulthood and adulthood. Also, when you look at populations of children who are at risk for juvenile delinquency or youth and adults that are in incarceration settings, we definitely see an overrepresentation of underdeveloped literacy skills. So in those populations, we see upwards of 50% or more of individuals that do not meet very basic benchmarks for reading comprehension. And we also know that in these populations, if we are able to strengthen literacy skills, they can act as a protective factor against recidivism, so reoffending for those in incarceration. They can support reintegration into the community after individuals leave the institution, or they can protect our youth from infractions with the law. And so this is why, probably this is maybe redundant for a lot of you, but this really is motivating and why I've taken a lot of time to learn about building strong reading skills, how we can do this effectively, and why I feel it's important. So we've talked a lot today about oral language. And definitely oral language is integral when we think about building literacy and reading skills. In addition, oral language in childhood and youth is supportive for individuals to communicate, to advocate for themselves and others, in addition to being a strong component of strong reading skills. And of course, in adulthood, oral language is really important to understand what is being said, to engage in communication, and to be able to participate in community and in job settings. For a second, I want to talk a little bit about theory. And in talking about oral language skills, I'd like to highlight what we call the simple view of reading that was first suggested in 1986. It has been borne out in the research since then. You can also refer to more recent studies if they're of interest to you. Larvag et al. 2017, Castles et al. 2018. The simple view of reading would suggest that our oral language skills, background knowledge, and vocabulary, two huge skills under the umbrella of oral language, and word reading skills or decoding skills, that these two broad areas come together for reading comprehension. So we know that the ultimate goal of all this instruction in oral language and building vocabulary and word decoding, understanding concepts about print and syntax in print is to lead to reading comprehension. It is the ultimate goal of engaging with text, whether it is for students who are studying for exams or to write professional designation kinds of exams in university and trade school, or whether it be for someone to dive into the fiction section of their local bookstore or library and get lost in the mental representations that good fiction, good prose can provide for us. Reading comprehension understanding what's read, is a key to integrating fully into school, but also in society. So when we talk about universal design so that everyone can access, and multi-tiered systems of support, through a lens of equity, I just want to share a quote with you around these things. 90% of children who demonstrate having difficulty to acquire reading skills, difficulties achieving grade level reading, if they receive help in the first grade, they will acquire those grade level skills. So 90% of children with reading difficulties. So back to my earlier question, can we prevent the eventual demonstration or the severity of reading difficulties and reading disabilities? If we approach in a universal way with empirically validated instructional strategies and systematic instruction in oral language and decoding. Now, there are other areas that we certainly can't ignore and that need as much attention, like reading fluency development and specific instruction in reading comprehension. I have a slide a little bit later on that. But today I'm just going to focus on these two very strong areas because they have they make the biggest contribution to reading comprehension in the early years, grades primary to grade 3. By contrast, 75% of children whose health is delayed, particularly beyond grade 3, where learning to read switches very quickly to reading to learn, and more students are required to build information, build knowledge, and supplement classroom teaching experiences by getting information out of informational text or literature. So for a large proportion of these children who do not respond to scaffolded supports or tier 2 instruction or interventions, or for whom the interventions lack the amount of intensity or are infrequent enough to really offset that trajectory and get it going in the right way, they will continue to struggle throughout their academic career. And there's other research, Jewel also has shown this, Snowburns and Griffin. These can appear as enduring consequences across children's educational experience. So this motivates us in the classroom, in particular as we're meeting children coming from, all of the consequences of the COVID pandemic in our province, to really support them with best practice instructional strategies and classroom instruction. So when we look at word reading, we've done a lot of conversation about oral language, so I'm going to leave that where it is. I'm going to focus on the foundational skills of word reading. Word reading, as Barb and others have pointed out today, requires instruction in phonological awareness and phoneme grapheme correspondence, so letter sound associations. So phonological awareness, what is phonological awareness? First, I will say that it is the single biggest predictor. Barb mentioned this. I'm sorry, I'm speaking a little quickly. I don't want to run over time, but it is the single biggest predictor, in particular phonemic awareness, which I'll talk about in a second, of whether children will be able to decode the words on a page. Phonological awareness has to do with oral language and is one's ability to apprehend and understand parts of speech. And phonological awareness, we think, starts developing very early in children's development, as early as infancy and preschool. And in fact, oral language has been linked in theory to the development of phonemic awareness. So home literacy environment and really rich oral language environments contribute to the development of phonological awareness. In the developmental process, phonological awareness develops from a more holistic kind of sense of understanding and knowing the whole word, so that there are boundaries around words that are indicated in speech by pauses. And then when we instruct in phonological awareness, we look at more fine-grained representations of phonological awareness, such as rhyming words, such as syllables, so word parts that come together to make a whole word, onset and rhyme. So in any syllable, the onset is the consonant or consonant cluster that precedes the vowel, and the vowel and any remainder in that syllable is represented as the rhyme unit. And finally, the phoneme. So the phoneme is the smallest unit of sound in the English language, and it also has the power to change the meaning of a word. So if you look at this word, pad has 3 individual phonemes, and I hope you can hear as I try to enunciate them, but p, a, d. And then when we add one phoneme, s, it changes from singular to plural. Phonemic awareness is the skill that lends itself most notably to word identification and word decoding. So I have a little interactive slide here that I wanted to just throw out to attendees. If you feel like trying to respond to this in the chat box, please do. And if you don't, of course, that's fine. But if you look at this image, it is for the word 6. And my question is, how many sounds are in this word? How many phonemes? And I'm sorry, I can't see the chat box. So maybe, Peru, if you could tell me if people are interested in responding or not and what some of the answers look like.
They're saying 4.
Okay, great.
And then there's 3 coming.
Okay.
4, 3. I think there was 2 earlier on.
Okay.
3.
Wonderful. I'm going to go ahead. So I've used an Elkonian box here to demonstrate how many phonemes are in the word 6. And if you're not familiar with Elkonian boxes, you very well might be, and this might be redundant or repetitive for you, but an Elkonian box is an intentional way that children can demonstrate, or a teacher can demonstrate, counting phonemes, tracking phonemes, deleting phonemes, and substituting phonemes. And an Elkonian box will lend itself to an in-person instructional strategy in developing phonemic awareness, as well as you can see, a virtual instructional approach. So in the word 6, there are actually 4 phonemes. S, e, k, s. So the X, the grapheme X, is represented in the English language by 2 sounds, k and s. And if you remove the final s, you would have the word sick or sick. Okay, so I just wanted to use this one example to demonstrate the fact that phonological and phonemic awareness exists in oral language, and we do want to tie it definitely to the graphemes or the letters that are representative of words in the English language, but that the two are not the same. And I have one more that I thought I would do too. So this is an image of a shoe, and I wondered if people are interested to guess how many sounds are in the shoe.
So they're indicating 2, 1, 3, 2, 3.
Okay, thank you, Pearl. Go on to the next one. So again, I've demonstrated with an Elkonian box that shoe, which is a word that has 4 letters, so 4 graphemes represent 2 phonemes. Sh, which is one sound, it is not a separable sound. Sh, and oo, which is a second sound. So how can you use this in your classroom if you're a teacher of early years, in particular P to 3? But I do want to note, we're going to talk about students in grades 4 to 6, 7 to 9, and 10 to 12. Underdeveloped phonemic and phonological awareness is an enduring kind of characteristic. And so potentially in adulthood, for students that are, or for adults that are trying to develop literacy, they may very well have underdeveloped phonemic and phonological awareness. So this is a skill that is very amenable to instruction. It will grow if taught and practiced, and as Barb has already said, is a precursor to meeting up with the written word. So this is a resource called A Sound Start. I've worked with this resource in partnership projects through my work at Mount St. Vincent with different individual schools and regional centers. And as well, a Sound Start is part of a summer literacy initiative that I am also a part of, whereby provincially it has been approved to order this resource for every region. And it is a structured instructional, I don't want to say it's not a program. It's a series of instruction that follows the continuum of phonological awareness that I suggested earlier. So from most holistic, the whole word, to most fine-grained, the phoneme. It is systematic in its approach in that it follows a linguistic approach across all the skills that will be very beneficial for very early learners. There is a whole class component to it. I believe there are 26 lessons that are also each tied to a piece of children's literature to lend itself to a shared reading session to start the instructional lessons. So that takes a UDL approach, meaning that it is accessible for all. Everyone is getting the best possible instruction right from the start. And it's fun, and sort of it can be used in an engaging play-based way. It can also be used in both in-person and virtual kinds of settings. So however things will look in the fall, this is one that I highly recommend. Also within this resource, you can differentiate instruction because there are several small group instructional lessons. So this might be for students who need a little more. We might consider this a tier 2 within class instructional approach, where a teacher or someone that in collaboration, perhaps the teacher support team or a speech and language pathologist whose training would make them very familiar with this type of a resource, can support additional, meaning more intensive instruction to give a child the opportunity to learn those skills. Manipulating phonemes, manipulating onsets and rhymes, and blending them together. And finally, there are also individual lessons, instructional lessons in the Sound Start resource. So again, this fits in within the context of multi-tiered systems of support, so that for children that still require even additional scaffolding to master and understand these lessons, there are opportunities to do that in ways that work in your school or in your classroom or in your virtual setting. So now I'd like to also take a minute and take you to the Developmental Phonemic Awareness Continuum, P to 3, that is on our curriculum. Oh, I didn't though, just a second, sorry. That is on our EECD website under Language Arts, P to 3. And so as you can see here, peruse this, is this proper screen sharing?
It is. Margaret, would you be able to take a few questions?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Just around Sound Start. So Jen Dickey was asking, what happens if the student struggles to retain individual sounds?
So can you tell me more, Jen? So you're teaching individual sounds, so individual phonemes, and the student is struggling to repeat them back or be able to, because at this point you're not showing any graphemes. Can you tell me a little more about your question? So I guess just to answer, oh, sorry.
Hi, sorry. So yes, thank you for taking my question. I've been working with a student, and one of the, he had an ed psych done, so now in grade 4. And one of the things is that he doesn't retain sounds. So from that perspective, does one look at whole word approach, or does one center down to word families and that kind, that they then are able to see word families as the cluster of words or sounds to recognize? What would...
Yep. So that is a very interesting question. I do have some slides that will address some of that, but just so what I would suggest always for children that struggle, and many struggle to acquire the level of phonemic facility that we would like. And so continued instruction and opportunities for repeated practice are always recommended. If your student is already in grade 4, then accessing some of the assistive technology supports, because already we know that that student is not able to engage in meaningful ways to comprehend the print that is in front of them on the page. And you're right, when you're pairing those sounds with individual letters, so the goal is for letter sound association knowledge to develop, but English, and I'll get to this a little later, tends to be a little more transparent at the level of the rhyme or the word family. So yes, practice blending onsets, so consonant and consonant clusters with rhyme units. And I do have a slide to show you where you can access lessons to support that.
Thank you, Margaret. And just one other question was, with the Sound Start, Michelle Day was asking many copies of this book in HRCE schools. A Department of Education board rollout some time ago.
Yes, I'm aware that there are some HRCE schools that are using this actively as a resource in their classrooms, and so that's wonderful. So if this is redundant for you, I apologize. This is kind of one resource that I really think that is very easy for teachers to use, both in person and virtually, and it will be met with, it should be met with a lot of success and efficacy in the classroom setting.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thanks, Peru. So I just want to go through this phonemic awareness and phonics curriculum. So I'll be showing this later because I am going to talk about also, as I said, letter sound correspondence or phonics. But as you can see on our curriculum website, and I'm told that not everybody is aware that this is available on the EECD curriculum website. It goes through behavioral kinds of observations that students may demonstrate when they are learning things like rhyming words, words which probably should come first, being that it's the most holistic, syllables, onsets and rhymes, and of course phonemes. And so to guide you as you are trying to kind of support students in intentional ways and using systematic instruction, this is one, I think, valuable resource. So I'm going to flip back to my presentation. So the second thing I want to talk about is the alphabetic principle. So phonological processing awareness and phonemic awareness are essential and integral in building strong reading skills. They are necessary but insufficient. So as an intervention, they have been demonstrated to have a causal effect on word reading skills, the ability to read the individual words on the page, but they need to be paired meaningfully and systematically with instruction in the alphabetic principle. And I'll show you that on the continuum as well. We see phonics instruction on that continuum as well. So we want to look at first building letter sound correspondence at the level of the individual letter. So vowels, consonants, blends, digraphs, and vowels. As children build facility with these individual letter sounds, we want to turn our attention to building knowledge with phonograms. And in particular, we want to spend time blending phonemes and phonograms. So of course, we want to do things like deletion, substitution, those kinds of things. So if I say mat and I replace the with s, what do I have? Those kinds of fun oral language, or you can use letter tiles. So that would be an example of substitution. If I have the word sat, say the word sat without saying at. That would be an example of a deletion. But the skill that lends itself most strongly to success with reading success is blending phonemes and phonograms. So I do have a little video that I'm going to show you. It is for all the young people who work with young ones out there, but it is one of my favorite videos to show. And I thought it just might be a little bit engaging because I don't have, aside from my Alconian boxes, I'm not sure I have a lot of, oh, I can't get it to start. Sorry, technology is not my day. Let's see if I can copy it. Oh, maybe I'll find it later. I have it in the second slide. Or we'll come back to that. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, can you see this?
Sorry, no, we can't, Margaret.
Oh, I can't. Okay, so you're still on my PowerPoint.
Yes, yes, we are. Yeah.
Sharing this tab to meet. I wonder why.
In a different tab.
Okay.
Yeah, you just have to stop sharing, then you come up.
Hi, Ken.
How you doing?
Good, thank you. So just share. Okay. But now you don't see it now, do you?
No, we don't.
So maybe I'll just yeah, I'll present a different tab then. So I'm.
Or you could stop presenting and present the whole of your window, your whole computer.
I think that the sound doesn't work when I do that, so I'm gonna try to do it like this, and if this doesn't work, we'll keep going.
Okay.
If your video is on,
I love the ABCs.
You see it now?
I love the ABCs so much. I love to put them in my mouth. I do. Who knows the alphabets in my mouth song? You do? I got the whole alphabet in my mouth. I got the whole alphabet in my mouth. I got the whole alphabet in my mouth. And I'm learning to read. I got the A in my mouth.
Just stop
I'm gonna
playing.
stop there just because I'm really I know my time is running, and I know Ken is here to present, and I don't want to run too much over. So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint.
don't worry about that. You can continue on.
Thanks, Ken. I've shown that before, and I know everyone is not necessarily an early years educator. I do like to show that because sometimes I think the feedback that we get when we talk about engaging with phonics and letter sound instruction is that it takes the fun out of learning to read, and it's very dry. And I just like to show that it can be extremely engaging and fun, and it's powerful at any age, which is something that I'm going to get to. The power of being able to crack the code is quite incredible. So again, working with blending phonemes, onsets, and rhymes is very important. It is a high leverage practice that you can use in your in-person or virtual or blended. This is a blending wheel. Some people may be familiar with it. Again, as I said, the front of my presentation has been geared more toward the early years from a prevention standpoint, but you can also use these wheels, and I'll show you a resource in a little bit for older students who have struggled to acquire these skills, middle school, junior high, and high school, or those who are really typically developing and you're looking at compound words or integrating morphology into your instruction. So I want to talk about phonograms for a minute. So building from letter sound, knowledge of phonograms. So phonogram is a term that's used across lots of different places. I read a lot of Tanya Hudson's work at the Florida Center for Reading Research, and she talks a lot about phonograms as they pertain to teaching reading and instruction, in particular reading fluency, which we're not really taking a deep dive into today. Phonograms generally are the rhyme units in words, and we were asked a question about word families, so they are related to word families. It's important to build children's facility with the way that these phonograms sound and look. So the phonological representation and the orthographic representation, because as I said, English is a little bit more transparent, so there's a little bit more consistency at the level of a phonogram. It is not consistent at the level of the individual letter. We have 26 letters of the alphabet in the English language, and there are 40 to 46 speech sounds. Some letter combinations, in particular vowels, have many ways to pronounce them, or sounds that are attached, and some sounds have several different ways that you can use words or letters to represent them. And so again, you can use these letter cards or I call them also word chunks, word chunk cards to build facility and understanding with the way that they sound and go together. So instruction and practice in the fun way that you saw. There's another video that maybe I won't show for the sake of time, where fun and engaging ways to blend phonograms together, starting with CVC in the early years and progressing to sort of blend, vowel blend type of thing is important, and will have huge gains. So again, when we look at, I'm going to go back to the continuum. When we look at the phonemic awareness and phonics continuum, we notice that there is a space on there that describes how
we lost your presentation, Margaret.
I'm just, yeah, sorry, Prue, I'm just trying to find the, 1 second. There. I'm using phonics. So of course, first we talk about it describes letter sound relationships. It gets in later to spelling patterns. So this would be different sort of word chunks or phonogram units. And there is also a space to talk about high frequency words, which I tend to, or irregular word spellings. So again, I think this is a really great resource for teachers, whether they be classroom teachers, specialists, support teachers, learning disability specialists, speech and language pathologists. The scope and sequence here is quite involved, which is great. And I'm just going to go back to my PowerPoint. I just have a few more tabs, and I'm sorry, it worked better for me when I was practicing yesterday. I was able to go between tabs really, really easily. So I'm not sure why it's not working today, but I think it's just the way it works out in the world often. So here we are. Okay. For that, I want to direct your attention to our Nova Scotia Department of Education and Early Childhood e-learning resource page. Maybe you are all familiar with it from our home learning. There were lots of curriculum sites developed, and we in Student Services developed literacy and numeracy resources. Peru, can you see this now?
No, because it's. I know I experienced the same. It's because it's in Chrome tab right now. It has to be viewed as the whole of your whole screen.
Okay, I'm going to try that now because I don't have any more with volume. I'm sorry if I'm making everyone dizzy, guys. Okay. So this is part of our Student Services e-learning page. And on this page, we look at support for students, either typically developing or those who require additional support, collaborative support, additional scaffolding in the areas of reading and writing. And there is math at the bottom. So the Florida Center for Reading Research is a wonderful resource for instructional supports, lessons, and student manipulatives. So as you can see here, you can look at pre-kindergarten, kindergarten and first grade, second and third grade, and beyond. So I'm going to click on second and third grade, for example, and we're going to look, because we're talking about letter sound association, and we're going to maybe talk about a word spinner. And so you can see that it has materials necessary and the activity, and this is a blending activity. So you would have 2 word cards, sh, ip, ship. You would practice blending these phonemes, and then it gives you student materials that they can cut out and then blend. So ache, or a real word, at. So in person, certainly this lends itself well. I can see it with a little bit of extra kind of, a little bit extra attached to it, lending itself to an virtual or blended model. But this is a wonderful resource. So what about children in middle school? So for children in middle school, we have to recognize that if their foundational skills, phonological awareness and letter sound correspondence and word reading skills are underdeveloped, they will require remediation in those. So I would never advocate to not try to remediate those skills because of the power that literacy has for opportunities. At this stage, you would always want to have supports such as those that Barb presented so that students can access the curriculum. And hopefully, if we've used supports strategically and appropriately, they have been able to continue to build vocabulary and content knowledge, but often this is not the case. And so core content knowledge, maybe around sciences or social sciences, is not developing at a pace commensurate with peers that are able to access it through instructional text and storybooks, which we know uses language and terms and words that are more sophisticated than in our everyday conversations. You want direct comprehension strategies for all children in middle school, because teaching children to be able to intentionally understand what they're reading and make mental representations is really important. Students will require also or benefit from work in morphology. There's a lot of work in coming out of Dalhousie in particular, University of Alberta, that's looking at contributions of morphological awareness. So our understanding of root words, prefixes, suffixes, etc., and how that contributes to both accuracy, fluency, and ultimately comprehension. Now, we have to recognize that students, by the time they're in middle school, will require more. They need more instruction, maybe daily. They need more intensity, which means perhaps more frequency or smaller group size. They need more repetition in the same skills that I talked about in the model of prevention. This now is an intervention model of instruction. And so they need more opportunities to practice, almost to overlearn these skills. And I would like to also stress that although it sounds like, and I think sometimes we shy away from this because it seems to take all the fun out of reading, but I think whenever I talk to students who have been able to receive this instruction and are able to connect with print, it is a very powerful experience, and it goes on to build motivation to read, which leads to more reading time, which leads to all kinds of great outcomes in a kind of a snowball fashion. So the other kind of framework that I'd like to just talk about very briefly in middle school is concept-oriented reading instruction. So this could be used in universal classroom instruction, and I can follow up with more information on this. But it's an approach to teaching reading comprehension strategies in a way that integrates sciences, social sciences, and English language arts. And it is relational in the way that students are able to connect with topics that are of interest to them. And so I taught this I taught in Mount St. Vincent when I was there, English language arts for Bachelor of Education students, and this was one of the frameworks. It's not a program or a resource, but it's a framework that comes out of University of Maryland to engage with students' motivation, things they're motivation to learn about, to engage with becoming factual writers, but again, for students that require alternative means of demonstrating their knowledge and understanding. We could do videos, you could do dictated text, all those kinds of things. And as well, it lends itself to project-based learning, which if we potentially find ourselves in a blending environment, could be advantageous through the next year with COVID. While this is going on in the universal classroom, for those students who still require remediation and word identification, this may have to be a tier 2 or tier 3 type of instructional model where we're still focusing on these things. So I want to talk about high school, and I think Mr. Ken Fowles will speak more about this, but what we need to recognize by the time students get to high school, often there are additional psychosocial considerations, social emotional considerations, and behavioral considerations. So many students that I've worked with in public high schools, and I've worked in schools that are dedicated to working with students with learning disabilities, very kind of severe in their manifestation. Students who have struggled for a very long time, again, as we said at the beginning, their self-esteem is suffering, and sometimes there are behavioral kinds of things that go along with struggling every day in the school environment, and thinking intrinsically that there's something wrong with the way that your brain works or that is with you that makes that happen. And that's not to say, very much so, learning disabilities are biologically based and have a huge heritability component to them, as do many students, as do kind of just struggling readers. But I guess what I'd like to impart is that we have ways to mitigate either the eventual diagnosis or the severity of these types of learning differences, in particular with respect to reading, before children get into their teenage years and in high school, when they don't want to engage in their classes because they don't know what was in the biology chapter, or they can't take academic biology because they don't have the content knowledge that precedes that. So the last thing I want to show is just some resources that are promoted by the Council and Administrators of Special Education, in particular for kind of our older struggling readers. There are programs in here, Fast Forward, which I think I heard someone speaking about earlier today. There are a couple of other ones, Reading Mastery. And these are other programs that at this point, I would like to say may or may not be approved at the provincial or regional level, but I did want to just show this resources here so that if these are interesting, especially to administrators and teachers at the secondary level, where it's very hard, it can be very hard to integrate this type of instruction into that type of day, that we could start these conversations with the appropriate channels to approval channels. So I'm going to stop sharing there. That's the end of my presentation. I hope I didn't speak too quickly, and I'm happy to, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Thanks, Margaret. That was a great presentation. So there is a question from Kelly Hiltz. Where can I find the Developmental Phonics Awareness Continuum?
Right, so that is actually on the Nova Scotia Department of Education curriculum website. And if you go to English Language Arts, click on P2-3 and you'll see a little link for the developmental curriculum, but it will also be in my slides when I upload them.
And you answered the other questions.
Oh, great. Okay, perfect. Go to level A assessment.
Yeah, so Jen, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, Prue, I just happened to see the chat. That's a good question, and I wanted to talk about the importance of early screening and progress monitoring. Thank you, Sherry. And I do, yes, I can recommend some skill-based, really quick to administer screening types of things, and perhaps when this is in the chat, I can send you an email and follow up, but really focusing time on instruction, although assessment and screening is really important, not taking away from the instruction. So it's important to have easy to administer and quick measures, and I can follow up with some of those.
Nancy's asking, has anyone heard of TAP or used it?
Oh, yes. Is it TAP or PAT? Sorry, I'm not sure that I'm familiar with that one.
It's Sherry says it's a test of auditory processing test, or PAT.
Thank you, Sherry. You would know all about those much better than I would.
Patricia asked, I have some students in grade 10 that don't read, and I'm going to make time to help them this year.
Wonderful. I can tell you that on a project that I worked on, and I probably should wrap up for Ken, where we brought remedial reading instruction right into classrooms for grade 12 and 11 and 12 students, and they wrote reflections about the impact of that kind of on their life, and it was very moving. For one student, they had never been able to read a book before, and they finally had the skills to do so. For others, they were able to engage in their daily classes, etc. So I'm really happy to hear that. I think if there are no more questions, I'm going to give the floor to Ken Fells, who is a colleague of mine at the EECD. who is a consultant in leadership and African Canadian services and a community leader. And he would like to talk to us about the contextual consequences of literacy. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Ken, go right ahead. The floor is yours.
So good afternoon, everybody. It's so good to see so many people out there. I've looked at some of the names. Some of you may know, and some of them I'd like to get to know. I'd like to express first that it's important for me to acknowledge my elders, for those folks whose shoulders I stand on. I certainly do want to acknowledge the fact that I do stand on Mi'kmaq and Maliseet unceded territory, and those warriors who protected it. And I also want to honor those folks who have passed away because of the COVID-19 epidemic or pandemic. So with that said, I think it's important to talk about the perspective I come from. A lot of you don't know about some of the things that I do, or the fact that I'm involved with the anti-racism, anti-discrimination module, which has impacted by a lot of the things that you folk deal with every day. And I think it's important to actually use a different lens sometimes. And I think the reason why Ms. Margaret asked me to come on is because I always contextually use a different lens when it comes to secondary students. And part of the rationale for that is because I am an elementary primary trained teacher. So I know how to teach reading and writing. I know that the comprehension skills that a child needs to navigate through the system, and that at the end of grade 2, those comprehension skills need to be at a certain level, or else that child will be labeled, regardless of who they are, in a way that is going to affect them for the rest of their academic career. So when Ms. Margaret is talking about the intrinsic pieces that affect children in the secondary part of their education, whether that is middle school, junior high, and going into high school, there is a sense of knowing, and there is a sense of intergenerational trauma that we have to consider when dealing with those particular children. So with that said, I'm just going to bring up a couple points and things that I think may resonate with some people, that if you feel good about what I'm saying, give me a thumbs up. If you feel like clapping about it, you do that. If you don't feel anything about it, then don't say anything, because I'm still not going to be discouraged. I do want to show a little video for you too, just to explain where that perspective comes from, about my own perspective. And I can't help but come from my own perspective and my life experiences, because as an 11-year-old, I had to go back to grade 4 and grade 6. So I'm not going to tell you about the time or where it was or what the generation was or what school it was, but the fact that I had to go back and learn to read with grade 4s, even though I could spell any word in the dictionary, because the way I was taught was call and response, that rhythm of learning that sometimes our educators, whether it was resource, whether it was learning center, whether it was through the adaptations or modifications, or in my classroom teacher, didn't have to provide that opportunity to engage me in the learning. So let's start there from that piece of the program to understand that we didn't know our children where they are, and we need to teach them where they are. Because by the time they get into that secondary part in grade 9, 10, and 11, there is a shaming process that even becomes more prevalent today because of that hormone imbalance, because of the shyness, because the gender. I just use my background of RCH. I use my background of being a responsive, culturally relevant individual who understands the value system that different children bring to school, and that we have to differentiate the learning environment, and with passion to know who they are. I learned based on my parents and my grandparents. Now keep in mind, my parents and my grandparents, grade 6, grade 11, grade 2, grade 3, grade 2, grade 3, those are the highest grades that they had. So navigating the education system back then, I can only imagine what it's like today, because COVID-19 has exposed so many different things today. when I was at Co-Harbor District High School, when I was at Grand Creighton, St. Pat's Alexander Schools, and the HRCE, the common thread was always the same. A lot of those children were on IPPs from the time they were in grade 2, without any paperwork, without any documentation. So by any means necessary, it was to move them to a space where they felt comfortable, and you didn't have to deal with them based on that intergenerational trauma or whatever skill set we could to get them to come out and, never mind the dialogue, get to work and do the work. Give them the confidence to do the work completely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop there, just show you a little video that I have, show you a short part of it, and then go to the end of it, because I don't want to show it all to you. I'll leave it in the chat if you haven't seen it before, just to show you what can happen coming to school. And from there, what we'll do is we'll look at, I'll answer some of the other pieces that I wanted to provide an opportunity for you for.
Hey, Mr. Q. Did you see that? Why would somebody do that?
Please go into the classroom, no talking, quietly.
Hey, Miss Meredith, how you doing?
We need you inside.
How do you think that makes us feel? I forgot my number.
What's your name?
Jordan.
What's your last name?
Carter.
All right. Go ahead.
School is hard enough.
Come on in, sit down quietly at your desks, and begin writing.
This kind of stuff just makes it harder.
I said quietly, please. Who's talking? Is it you, Sophie? Don't let it be you.
Don't believe me?
Sophie.
Please just watch.
I'm not up here for me, I'm up here for you. Pay attention, okay? Now somebody answer me. Somebody needs to answer me really fast.
Every time we're ignored or yelled at or silenced, the teacher takes away what's possible.
No horseplay, no running, and especially no talking.
Moment by moment.
Miss McGarity, your student's behavior yesterday in the lunchroom, it was terrible. Next time, silent lunch.
Did you hear that? Stay in line and catch a bubble. I'm not playing.
If this is education, we're in trouble. Bye, Miss McGarity. Frederick Douglass said, once you learn to read, you'll be forever free. The way it is now, 2 of the 3 of us will never be able to really read. It doesn't have to be this way.
Hey, Jordan, how you doing? Good.
Everyone we meet throughout our day can make a difference.
I've been waiting for you to arrive.
All the difference.
Good, how are you? Great. Hi, Jordan. Bye, Jason.
Good morning, Jordan.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Good.
Go ahead and put your number in.
Talk with us, not at us.
That's okay. I'll look it up for you. Go ahead, sweetheart.
Okay.
All right. Have a
Teach us what we need to know. That's how we get smarter.
Well, good morning, Sophie, Janicia, and Jordan.
And when you talk with us and teach us, give us bigger and bigger words.
Now what I'd like you to do, children, is turn around and converse with your neighbor and discuss where the mother might have gone.
Words that we can use to read and understand.
She is prey for eagles, so she hunts at night.
And that will take us places we could never reach without you.
Remember, we're entering the learning zone. Now, how can we show our respect to the children and teachers who are working?
We can walk quietly.
Yes. Okay, kids, so what I'd like you to do is continue writing your narrative, documenting your emotions. If you were the baby owl and your mother abandoned you in the nest.
What can you do? Learn all that you can so that you can challenge us to be our best.
You would have stayed and assisted them in whatever they needed.
Share yourself with us and show us how to share ourselves with others. Give us courage. Give us compassion. Help us find our own voices so we can become who we are meant to be.
Why would you want to silence us?
So I think it's important that what I try to do is I try to pause it, but what happens normally in this situation, you get kicked out. So on the other hand, I think it's really important to understand that the value system I'm trying to bring is, if you don't know your children, and even if you do know them, you still have to treat them with the same respect. And when I was a resource teacher, or when I was working in high school, I always had to know those children, greet them every day, and ensure that they were the most special person that I could deal with. But we already know that. But some people miss the point. And so we need to ground ourselves in that. So the important thing that I wanted to talk about to you today is that we need to change the programming. And it's not just about the data walls. It's not just about the disaggregated data, not the macro level, but bring it down to the micro level so you can actually work with the children where they are. But that needs to start at an earlier grade. Those collaborative learning teams, those collaborative learning groups, all those pieces need to work to support your school planning team. Those innovative styles, because what I've learned is the incentive of teachers to teach children is to ensure that they're comfortable teaching the actual students and allowing them to have that power of teaching themselves. They're the ones who are going to tell you how they learn. You can't do that if you're bringing a value system into the system that doesn't work for them. So from school planning to program planning, being there, ensuring that your administrator's there, and doing all those positive things are good. So programs that we brought to the high school, Spell Read was one of the programs, guided reading at the elementary school, read and recovery, change your practices. This helps you with the ability to demonstrate grade level outcomes, reading records, writing samples, comprehension, inferring, connecting to self, text, world, ability to communicate needs and wants. Ask for help if you don't know. Problem solving skills, persistence to keep trying when work is hard, independence to try something else. With that said, what I'm trying to say to you is we can't give up, or we can't take those opportunities to lose children through some of the systemic barriers that are already there. That's why we need to use a different lens. And you know what? It's not easy work. It never has been. But when you get comfortable in how to manage those pieces yourself, you're going to be the expert, which you already are. Nobody says you're not doing a great job. We just remember that we're alone in the classroom. We just remember we're alone as administrators. The other piece is we do have somebody to reach out to have that voice. So it's clear that that's how we support those systems. The confidence that we had with our children when we brought in that particular program was twofold. We didn't teach everybody at Co-Harbor District High School. We went to the Co-Harbor Place. We went to the community in North Preston. We went to the halls downtown and the libraries down hall to ensure that those children were not shamed and they came out of their shells and they became productive people, because nowhere better than the high school context can that work. You don't have to have the same child in the classroom all the time. You can put the child in somebody else's class where the teacher is comfortable with them being there and the child is comfortable where that teacher is. It's not about you. It's not about the teacher. It's about the outcomes and ensuring that the children get to reach the outcomes. That's where success comes, and that's how those students move ahead. And always keep in mind that 7% of all students on IPPs, they're entitled to get into skilled trades, IB programming, if they're capable, all those other programs, they're entitled to that because of the special education document. So keep those things in mind. Those are the specialties that we have to have knowledge of to engage children to be progressive through secondary into the next step. I don't know how many children I've had that I had to write a letter for going on to post-secondary institutions that they needed to have a bit more time or a skill set. And now they're teachers. Now they're red sealed. Now they're mechanics. They're dental assistants. They're moving on forward with their lives because somebody looked at them and heard their voice. That's the key to the success of programming and teaching children.
Ken, thank you so much for that. That is very impactful and meaningful. Were there any questions? I had to leave. I got kicked out of my other, I don't have a chat, so I don't have a record of the chat box or if there are questions in the chat box.
Happens to me all the time.
There's just lots of thanks to you, Ken. There's no questions.
All right, so I can go on to back to my other session then.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ken. Have a lovely rest of this Summer Learning Academy.
Yeah, if you need me for anything else, just let me know. Have a great day.
Okay, you too. Bye now. Thank you, Peru, for copying the chat. I don't know what happened. My screen froze in my last session. So we've now been brought to 3:15. I think it's been a long, informative, and packed day. If there are any remaining questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat box or aloud, and we will get back to you. I would, on behalf of our presentation team and others, please speak up when I'm done. But thank you so much for spending a beautiful sunny day with us, so that we could share information together and work towards supporting all of our children and families. Bye for now, everyone. Thank you.